ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादां सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमां विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशकारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामिने गौरतुषे नमः। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण। नमोस्तुते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्रे येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपरिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। We'll start a new chapter today, chapter 15 of Bhagavad-gita. In chapter 14, Lord Krishna spoke about the three modes of material nature. So the three modes, they act like shackles, chains that bind the jiva to material life. In this chapter, Lord Krishna will talk about how to get free from those shackles. And the remedy is the study of the Vedas or the Vedas. They give us the path of freedom from the shackles of three modes of material nature. So that is explained here in this chapter 15. Bhagavad-gita. It's a very small chapter, only has 20 verses in it. So from the previous chapter, let's see if you remember this. What is the cause of the jiva's ongoing bondage? The jiva is in bondage because of what? The jiva is bound because of that you are not able to unmute yourself. Three modes of material nature. Very good. Then, are the modes of material nature eternal? The answer is yes. Is
Yes.
there influence on the jiva eternal?
Yes. No.
No, it can end, right? So in 14.26, Lord Krishna said, by performing unalloyed devotional service, Mam cha yo avyabhicharini. Bhakti Yogena Sevate. One can transcend the three material modes and attain the status of Brahman. However, to attain that devotion and attachment to Krishna, one needs to develop detachment from this material world, right? And the process of breaking attachment uh, is explained in this chapter 15, in the beginning verses, how to become detached. So, why does the quality of detachment play an important role in disassociating ourselves with the modes and their effects? Why do we need detachment? Why do we need this quality? Why not knowledge is enough?
Because we will get re-attracted to the modes if we are not practicing detachment.
Okay, we may get re-attracted to the modes. And what else does detachment help in doing or achieving?
If we are detaching from the material this thing, we will be able to attach to Krishna.
Yes. And
to progress in our spiritual life, we need detachment.
okay, why do we need detachment? What role does it play?
To get attached to the Supreme Personality.
Okay.
Detach from the sense gratification.
Yeah, why? Why detach from sense gratification?
So that we get higher experience and higher taste in.
They cause suffering because they cause suffering or temporary happiness.
Yes. Yes.
And they also cause ignorance. Attachment causes ignorance. That's why we have to get detached.
Detachment binds us to the material world always. Material attachment. So that's why we have to be detached to progress.
Yes. So detachment helps us in this way also. We have knowledge. We have read the Bhagavad-gita. We have heard lectures. Now we have knowledge. But then, because the three modes are constantly bombarding us, so we may easily get distracted, though we may have the knowledge, right? So what will the quality of detachment help us in doing? It will help us to have steadiness in our discrimination of what is right, what is wrong. The goal becomes always in your, the goal remains in your foresight. You don't get distracted from it when you have detachment, because detachment basically means not getting attached to distractions. That's detachment. You're not getting attracted or attached to distractions. That's detachment, right? So you already know that this is where you need to go. And if I don't have the spirit of detachment, I may get allured very easily from the goal, right? I may get allured away from the goal. So therefore, detachment helps us becoming steady in our knowledge, in our discrimination. It sharpens the sword of knowledge, the knowledge that we already have. It sharpens that sword. So detachment basically, when translated otherwise, it can mean breaking attachment. That's called detachment. It's a nature of the conditioned soul to naturally get attached to material things, right? You associate with any material object in this world, you will get attached. You'll get attached easily. Anything. And it doesn't have to be a good thing. It can also be a very bad thing. Isn't it? So you get attached. So detachment means breaking attachment constantly. And that has to be done as a practice, as a regular practice. That keeps the knowledge always sharp, the sword of knowledge. Which knowledge? I am Krishna's part and parcel. I am Krishna's servant. I am spiritual. I am not this material body. My goal of life is to come back to Godhead. So in this way, you constantly develop that knowledge. Detachment or breaking attachment sharpens the sword of knowledge. So the first point here is detachment from material world. That's what Krishna is going to teach Arjuna. The yoga of the Supreme Person, Purushottam Yoga. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhva Moolamadaha Shakham Ashwatham Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Paranani Yastang Veda Saveda Ved. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. Right? Now, here you see the Lord is referring to this tree as imperishable. Fine. Few verses later, Lord Krishna will say, cut down this tree with the axe of detachment. You cut it down with the axe of detachment. If it is imperishable, how can it be cut it down? Imperishable means one that doesn't die, isn't it? Or you cannot destroy. But Krishna is saying after a few verses that you cut it down with the axe of detachment. So if the adjective or the quality imperishable is given to it, then how can it be cut it down? Can it be cut it down? If yes, then why Lord Krishna is calling it imperishable? In sense of material world. That material world is imperishable. But then will he say you cut down material world? No, he is talking about your individual material life. You cut it down with the acts of detachment. So why is he saying avyaya, this tree of material life is imperishable? No clue. So Lord Krishna is saying it is imperishable. Why? Because if you look at a tree, there are two ways a tree can perish. One is when you cut it down. The other is naturally. A tree will die, hasn't it? Either you externally by force you cut it, or naturally it's going to die, isn't it? Correct. So when it's an imperishable material existence, what does it mean? That material life on its own is imperishable. It's not that naturally it's going to end. It is avyaya. It's imperishable. So you can't think in this way that on its own, someday the material life will get over. Material existence of jiva will get over. It is imperishable on its own. It's not possible. But by the sword of transcendental knowledge or the acts of transcendental knowledge and detachment, you can cut it down. That way it is possible. Otherwise, it's not possible. Just like we discussed, no, in the slide that how long has been the association of the jiva with the material modes? Time immemorial. But can it end? Yes, it can end. Yes, it can end. Right? Yes, it can end. So it is imperishable in that way, but it can end, or it can be destroyed by cutting it down with the sword of knowledge. Urdhva moolam adaha shakam. He's talking about a tree which is upside down. The roots are upward and the branches are downwards. Urdhva moolam adaha shakam. Ashwatham prahur avyayam. The Prabhupada gives a very nice purport here explaining this concept of upside down tree. Purport. Yes, someone please read. Vaiji Mataji would like to read.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. After the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It is explained in this chapter that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. The entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has to end. And for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. This process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapter, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we've seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entities' activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Now, there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upwards. But there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and the roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree. And from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti Purusha, then the three gunas, then the five gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, then the 10 senses, that's the Sendriya, mind, etc. In this way, they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. The material world is a perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself, and that is explained in Bhagavad-gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off the attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada explains here that material world and its entanglement is compared to a banyan tree. Why? Because it's very complicated. It's huge, it's complicated. It's spread across good area, huge area. And it has so many roots and then intertwining of the roots and the shoots, right? So banyan tree refers to a very complex and complicated mess of material life. Now, he explains here that this tree roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located. It's an upside down tree. So we imagine the whole material creation as upside down with its origin starting from Brahma Loka, and then spreading downwards because Brahma begins the creation and the creation happens downwards, right? Not upwards, downwards. Brahma Loka is the topmost. And from there he begins to create the lower planetary systems, lower as per his vantage point, right? So the tree grows downward. The roots, they grow upward. And the process of extrication is explained here, which is transcendental service to the Supreme Lord. God says there is no ready experience in this world of a tree which is situated with its branches down and its root upward. But there is such a thing, like in a reflection of water. So with this analogy, another principle is drawn. Just like a tree needs a surface of water to reflect upon. Similarly, if this tree is a reflection of the actual original tree in the spiritual world, that tree has reflected upon a surface to create a material reflection. And that surface is, in this case, water. And in the case of material life and spiritual life, is the surface of material desire. Right. So as long as there are material desires, the jiva will have a material life. When the material desires are over, then the jiva does not have any material life. Isn't it? What is the way of removing a reflection? If there is no water, there won't be any reflection. Correct? So if there is no material desire, there is no material life, a material experience. Then Prabhupada explains how this material world is a reflection of spiritual world. Fine, next verse. Oh, before we go to the next verse, this is something which we can discuss. The leaves of this tree, the banyan tree, are compared to the Vedic hymns. Why so? What is the reason of this comparison? Reason behind this comparison? Why comparing the Vedic hymns to the leaves of banyan tree?
Vedic hymns glorify Krishna.
Okay.
Maybe because they are not the essence of the Vedas.
But then why they are being compared to the leaves of the tree?
Prabhuji, ritualistic part of the Vedas are compared to the green leaves. Karmakandis are attracted towards.
Why? Why? Yeah, karmakandis are attracted towards. That is true.
They feel it is permanent, but it is temporary.
No, nothing like that.
Leaves are fed by the branches. They get food by the branches.
Leaves are the main thing to pass on the nourishment, whatever has been given to the tree.
Correct. So
Because
here,
there are many.
Here the Vedic hymns are, you should know that here the comparison to Vedic hymns is not done in the sense of the spiritual knowledge or transcendental knowledge given in the Vedic hymns or the Vedas. The tree, it looks beautiful when it is full of leaves and flowers. So material life looks beautiful when it is full of material sense gratification. Correct? Right? Now, the Vedic hymns, most of them is helping the jiva to live a good material life, because most of the section of the Vedas is karma kanda. Right? So the Vedic hymns are compared to the leaves of the tree. As you said, Mataji, the trees gets its nourishment through the leaves. The leaves, they capture the sunlight, photosynthesis happens. And then, therefore, the tree gets its food and the tree remains very strong and healthy. Similarly, for material sense gratification, one follows the Vedas, the Vedic hymns. And in that way, the tree of material life looks very healthy, green. Right? So that's why the Vedic hymns are compared to the leaves. So here we should know which Vedic hymns, the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, which helps to make the tree look beautiful, external. The material, the tree of material life. Right? Materialistic mentality, Prabhupada says, materialistic mentality is to make the tree of material life look lush and green. But the mentality of a spiritualist is opposite. So then the spiritualist will use the other section of the Vedas, just like Krishna said in Bhagavad-gita, chapter 2. Nistre guno bhavajuna. You go beyond the three gunas. But then the Vedas, they talk about what? The three gunas, subject matter within three gunas, most of the Vedic sections. Right? So that's what Krishna tells in second chapter. No, you try to transcend this particular section of the Vedas. Go beyond. All right. Further description given about the tree. Let's read the next verse. 15.2. Adhaschordhang prasitastasya shakha guna pravriddha vishaya pravalaha adhascha mulani anusantatani karmanubandhini manushya. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Siddhi Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities, namely human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, etc. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that a tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes a tract is very green. Similarly, where particular modes of material nature are proportionately greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifested accordingly. The twigs of the tree are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses, and by the senses, we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. The tips of the branches are the senses, the ears, nose, eyes, etc., which are attached to the enjoyment of different sense objects. The twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on, the sense objects. The subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendency towards piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots which spread in all directions. The real root is Brahmalok, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma or fruitive activities for promotion. This planet of human beings is considered the field of activity. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Dandavat.
Any questions from this purport and the previous purport?
Why
Can I ask?
they told banyan tree, bro? Basically, any tree is like that only, no?
No. How any tree is like that? Banyan tree or Ashwatha is very complicated in its structure. Its roots are spread far, you know, like it can be huge. And then what happens? The branches, from there also you find secondary roots are coming. Have you seen a
Correct.
banyan tree? Right?
Correct.
So here it is explained in the purport that what are these secondary roots? The secondary roots are karmas of the living entity. You know, so every time the living entity does a new activity, that makes a new root, secondary root. It's not that there was one original activity which is the cause of the material existence. If that is so, fine, you just remove that root. But here it is saying it's so complicated. Every time you do a new activity, a new karma, it becomes a new secondary root, which means the more you stay in this material world, the more and more complicated your material existence begins. In other trees, there's only one root and there's a stem, a trunk. But in banyan tree, there's one trunk, and then after some time, the roots are formed in another place, and there's another trunk. And after some time, roots are formed in another place, and there's another trunk. So it gets more and more complicated. That's why comparison. Ashwat. Okay. No question. Go to the next verse. Let's go to third verse. Third and fourth. Narupamasyeha tatopalabhyate nanto na chadirna sampratishta ashvatthamenam suvirudha moolam asanga shastrena dridena chitva tatah padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gatana nevatanti bhuyah tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yatah pravrittihi prasita purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Therefore, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom everything began, and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. Here it says, Asanga shastrena drilena chitva. You have to cut it with the acts of detachment, strong and acts of detachment. Asanga shastrena. Shastra means weapon. Asanga means detachment. So you cut it through the acts of weapon of detachment. Drilena chitva. And you should have repeated determination. Repeat discrimination. Drilena chitva. Repeated discrimination of spiritual and material, spiritual and material, spiritual and material. And what is material? You cut it through the acts of detachment. So it's like an ongoing cutting process. Just like if you want to cut a huge tree, then you have to again and again hit the same point with the axe. Once hitting the root will not work. You have to again and again hit. So you hit again and again. Slowly and slowly the wood gets chopped, and then the root gets disconnected from the trunk, and the trunk is then completely cut, right? Similarly, here is asanga shastrena dridena chitva, with repeated discrimination. What is material, what is spiritual, what is sat, what is asat? You keep on hitting with the acts of detachment. In this way, you cut that material life or material existence. But after that, what you should do? One must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. So these two verses are put together. You cut your material life, but then you find shelter in Krishna. If you simply cut your material life and you don't find shelter in Krishna, then what will happen? You'll become completely dry in heart. So you cut your material life, and at the same time you find shelter in Krishna. Find that place. Having gone where, one never returns. And there you surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right. So this is done together simultaneously. Disconnecting from material life, getting connected to spiritual reality. Both. If we simply get disconnected from material life and not get connected to spiritual reality, we will become very dry-hearted, impersonal in nature. So you need to do both together. Purport. Rajvasini Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Dandavata. It is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world. Since the root is upwards, the extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the material expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father. My father is the son of such and such a person, etc. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbhodaka Sai Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the head of the research work, one has to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from this false reflection of reality, and by knowledge, one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. The word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and lauding it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. The description of that place where whence having gone one never returns to this false reflection tree is given here. Reflected tree is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the original root from whom everything is emanated. To gain favor of that personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, etc. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This has already been explained by the Lord himself. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this material extension. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
So it said you go to that place from where one never returns. Now how to go to that place? That is explained in the next verse. What is that place? Padamavyayam, the spiritual world. So how do you go there? By developing these qualities. Explained in 15.5. 5 points I mentioned here, 5 qualities. Nirmana moha, vitasanga dosha, adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha, dvandve vimuktaha, sukha dukkha sange, gachanti mulaha padamapmayam tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Fine. So, nirmana, becoming free from false prestige. Moha, becoming free from illusion. Titasanga dosha, becoming free from the association of 3 modes. Adhyatma nitya, always engaged in adhyatma, eternal spiritual knowledge. Vinivritta kamaha, becoming free from lust, material desires. Tvanve vimuktaha, sukha dukkha sangir, becoming free from dualities such as happiness, distress. Gachanti, amulaha, unbewildered soul. He goes to Padamavdeyam, right? Purport. Let's read the purport. Hello, purport.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, that was the surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride because the conditioned soul is purified up, thinking himself the Lord of material nature. It is very difficult for him to surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not Lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietor. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of the world. When one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna. Dandavad.
Any question or comment? So Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan Prabhu, he also describes these 7 qualities in a slightly different manner, very short and easy to understand. He says, what is nirmana? Without pride, which is generated from respectful treatment by others. Nirmoha, absorption, free from absorption in what is false. Chitta Sanga dosha, free of the fault of affection for material things and relationships. Adhyatma Nitya, daily considering the nature of the soul and supersoul. Vinivitta Kamaha, free of material desires. Vimuktaha, tolerant of opposites, which is dualities. And Amuraha, knowledge of the process of surrender.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
At a general level, pride comes at later stage of our life when we start to accumulate wealth or accumulate qualifications, and but before that it is just simple enjoyment of the material world that we are bewildered with. Correct? Pride is coming at a later stage. So I hear pride is the main source. Like,
here, that pride is not being spoken of. which you develop because of material achievements. The false pride which a jiva anyway has as a conditioned soul.
Yeah.
Right? That pride which a jiva, a conditioned soul, naturally has. That is being spoken. Not the material situational pride, but that pride which a jiva naturally has, a conditioned soul jiva. That's pride. That is always there, whether you are poor or rich, successful or not successful. Right? Always. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, do this exercise, please. Take 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Avyayam is that word, means eternal.
Okay, let other devotees also look at it. So that word is avyaya, which means eternal. Now, if material world is also eternal, the spiritual world is also eternal, why should we seek the spiritual world?
Prabhuji, material world is full of distress, while spiritual world is full of bliss.
In material world, Jivatma keeps changing from one body to another, from distress to happiness, it will be fluctuating. Though the world is eternal, but Jivatma keeps transmigrating. In spiritual world, both the spiritual world and the Jivatma are eternal.
Original position is in the spiritual world and not in the material.
Material world is eternal, but it's only a reflection of spiritual world.
Material world is ups and down. It's always the happiness and distress, but in the spiritual world, always the happiness, bliss.
In spiritual world, there is no janma, mrityu, jara, vyadi.
And what is the difference? What else? Why
Imperishable.
should we seek?
Imperishable, it mentioned in 15.1. That is the thing. Material world here is imperishable, but in the spiritual world, it's not. It's perishable. It's not imperishable. I think that's correct.
We should seek the spiritual world because though material world is eternal, our position in material world is not eternal, right? We will keep on getting a new body. So that is very troubling actually, right? Though material world is eternal, but our position there is not eternal. In the sense, we are not always the way we are. Newer bodies, everything new, always changing experience. So dukkhalayam ashashvatam, right? It's not shashvat. Our, our, our identity is not eternal. So in spiritual world, the spiritual living entity will get a spiritual eternal identity and can always function in that identity. That's the difference. That's why Krishna is imploring the soul that you leave this temporary material life in which you keep on changing your forms and come to an eternal life where you have an eternal identity. Right? Next verse. Transmigration of the soul. Before that, he talks a little bit about the spiritual world. Na tat bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yad katva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. That supreme abode of mind is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. A hint is given of what the spiritual world is like. It is not illumined by the sun or moon, fire, or electricity. That's the nature of that place is explained here. Just in one verse, what is the nature of spiritual world as explained here. And if one doesn't go there, then one is definitely coming back to material existence, material life. Prabhupada tells here very nicely, he says in the Prabhupada, you should be captivated by this information, the spiritual reality. Prabhupada. Nagarajan Prabhupada. Can't hear me, Nagarajan Prabhupada. Can you read, please? Shamala Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The spiritual world, the abode of the spiritual personality of Godhead Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavana, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moon, shine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous, but all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, continues the shining sky known as the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavana. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahat Tattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavana. As long as a living entity is in this dark material world, he is in conditioned life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditioned life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of the material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should set out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off this attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words Paramam Mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord. But the spiritual world is Paramam, full of six opulences. The Katha Upanishad 2.215 also confirms that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Na tatra shurya bati na chandra tarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada says here in the Prabhupada, one should be captivated by this information, right? And he should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. Now, how do you get captivated? So you get captivated by hearing and reading about the spiritual reality. Therefore, in the introduction to Bhagavad-gita, Prabhupada said that out of great compassion on the living entities, Krishna has given Veda-shastra. That those scriptures give us spiritual substance to hook our mind to. If the scriptures won't exist, we will not have subject matter for our mind to dwell upon. And if that is not there, we will not be able to extricate ourselves from material life. So one should be captivated by this information given in the scriptures. Captivated. Mamayvamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manasasthani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Yes, Shrishti.
Hare Krishna. Purport. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditioned life, and in his liberated states becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatanaha. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms, like Lord Ram, Nrsingadev, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominating deities in Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. As an individual soul has its personal individuality and a minute form of independence. Minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati, struggling, or grappling, is significant. The conditioned soul is bound up, as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body, but the mind and the sense is liberated. This material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyandina Yana Shruti. Sava esha brahmanistha idam shariram martyam atishriya brahma bhisham padya brahmana pashyati brahmana shinoti brahmanevidam bhavati. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in this spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. The Smriti is also understood. Vasanti yatra purushaha sarve vaikuntha murtayah. In the spiritual plane, in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnumurti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Mama Evam Saha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion, not like some material broken part. We've already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is applicable here, because the Sanskrit word sanatana, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehi nosmin yatha dehi. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold.
In this verse, the struggle of the jiva, Krishna said, right? The jiva is struggling with the senses, which include the mind. So the struggle of the jiva is explained. Shariram yat avapnoti yachchapi utkarmati shvaraha grihit vaitani sanyati vayur gandha ivashayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So, the struggle of the jiva is explained. Now, though the jiva is struggling very hard, but the problem is the jiva is not looking at that struggle as a struggle. The jiva is thinking that as great privilege. But the jiva is struggling with the senses, which include the mind. And the jiva is then again changing body, getting a new body. Right? Yes, Uma Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The chain his body undergoes depend upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or dog, he is sure to change to a cat's or dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. This process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karsati, or struggle for existence. Hare Krishna.
Shrotram chakshuspashanam cha rasanam grahanam eva cha adhishtaya manaschayam vishayanupasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Neha Mataji.
In other words, if the living entity adulterates his consciousness with the qualities of cats and dogs, in his next life he gets a cat or dog body and enjoys. Consciousness is originally pure, like water. But if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure, for the spirit soul is pure. But consciousness is changed according to the association of the material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. When, therefore, one is situated in Krishna consciousness, he is in his pure life. But if his consciousness is adulterated by some type of material mentality, in the next life, he gets a corresponding body. He does not necessarily get a human body again. He can get the body of a cat, dog, hog, demigod, or one of many other forms. Or there are 84 lakh species. Hare Krishna, Dandot.
Okay. Any question so far? So now the next two verses they talk about who sees the struggle and who does not see the struggle. Fine. One who is endeavoring spiritually will see the struggle of for existence. And one who is not endeavoring spiritually will never see the struggle. Next verse talks about that yatanto yoginash. Sorry, 15.10 talks about one who does not see. Utkramantam sitam vapi kunjanam va gunanvitam vimulana pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spells of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Parangati Prabhu.
The word jnana chakshushaha is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body, nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body. This requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad-gita and similar literatures, heard from a bona fide spiritual master. One who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He's living under certain circumstances, and he's enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power to understand their change of body and their stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that spirit is different from the body and is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. A person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their conditioned life is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world.
Okay. So, remaining verses we'll do in the class tomorrow. This chapter has 20 verses. So we've done 10 today, 10 we'll do tomorrow. Question is there in the chat box? One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. Can you please elaborate little more? If I am spirit soul, then what is my own thing? What is mine actually if I am spirit soul? Then spiritual life or spiritual existence or spiritual reality is mine. And material reality is not mine. I don't belong to material reality. So that is what is being told. To understand the difference between what is spiritual and what is material. Because as spirit soul, I am foreign to this place, material world. So that is being said here, to understand what is one's own and what is not one's own. Yes, any other thing?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. Like a detachment, this is the topic of detachment, that is also sanctioned by the mercy of Krishna, right? We do our efforts for the detachment, but that is also happens if we do the effort determination that he will arrange our circumstances like that to detach from the material world, right? Everything happens like both 2 inches, like mercy and efforts. Our efforts and mercy, without his sanction, that detachment also not happens, right?
Yes, that is true. To detach ourselves from material life, also we need mercy of Krishna.
Yeah.
So one is always trying to detach oneself, but one will not be able to. Right? It's like the pastime is there of Raghunath Das Goswami. He was constantly trying to get away from household life and go to the Shraddha of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But he was failing again and again, right? Because he had not yet obtained the mercy of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, or the right time had not come. So we may try to get detached. However, it doesn't happen always immediately, because Krishna's sanction is not there, or sufficient, mercy is not yet with us. So it takes time. And another thing is that it's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, in the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, Dhruva Charitra. Prabhupada writes saying one of the purpose. As long as a conditioned soul has not suffered and enjoyed all the material reactions, what we
Okay.
have done in the past, the pious and the sinful. So the living entity does not become free to transcend to spiritual reality. So though we may want to get completely detached right away from material life, but our past karma will not allow us.
Okay.
Therefore, you have to wait for that time, the right time. Meanwhile, you burn off your, good and bad reactions, both good and bad. Both.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, in the same context, we still have to try our best for detachment, because we never know, right, when those debits and credits will become zero. I mean, when we enjoy all the pious activities and burn these karmas. So we are not
So
aware of that.
you have to put efforts to be detached. That is true. The point here is, even while you are enjoying those pious rewards of your pious activities, you do that also in the spirit of detachment only. Because if you start enjoying them with attachment, you are creating a new loop, right? So you enjoy and you suffer with the spirit of detachment. In the spirit of detachment, whatever you enjoy it seeing it as a mercy of Krishna. And whatever you suffer that also seeing that as a mercy of Krishna.
Yes.
So you're not creating any new karma then.
Yes.
Right? Not creating a new karma then. So you have to enjoy and suffer both with the spirit of detachment.
Yes, Prabhuji. So, and one day, those credits or debits will finish, and then you are fully detached. That's right.
Yeah, then you're fully disconnected.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, so we're done for the day. We'll continue tomorrow. Remaining 10 verses of this chapter, we shall discuss tomorrow. It's a very short chapter, so I think tomorrow also the class won't go long. There is a question. It said in the commentary of second verse that this planet is field of action. Is any spiritual progress on higher planets possible, or just spending karma? No, it's both the ways. You are spending good karma, as well as in the higher planets, you can also engage in devotional service to Krishna. Both the things. But then you are not creating new karma, because devotional service is not anyway a karma, no? Devotional service is anyway not karma. So you are engaging in devotional service, and because you're engaging in devotional service, you may just be allowed to continue to stay there. And devotional service is in itself a pious action or a pious activity. So as long as you are engaging in devotional service, You are not losing your pious credits, so you continue to stay in the higher planetary systems. Right. But there's no generation of new karma.